Let's go.
Not too hard, girl. Not too hard. Come on, that's like 2.5 feet right there.
Hello, Sarah. Welcome back to the Trails Collective interview series. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I can't complain at all. So we had you on a couple weeks ago in the Trails Collective news show, and it was wonderful. People loved it. And I wanted to have you back to do a little bit longer and get into some more fun stuff. People know about you, but, I think that we have a different audience than like a national audience. It's a little bit more niche.
Yeah.
I think this is just going to be fun. So thanks for doing this today.
Yeah, no problem.
So I actually want to start where you started running. So when did you start running? And was it high school, college, or did you just jump into ultras?
So I started running not in high school even. I was not a competitive kid. Well, my mom and my family probably would say I was a competitive kid, but I didn't really do sports. I did like softball in the summers as a kid, and then I joined cross country because one of my friends did, and I thought, yeah, this might be fun. And we got out of sight of the coach, and I walked the rest of the way, and I never went back for another like training. And then I did track and field a couple of years, I think, but I was so anxious and nervous of racing against people on the track that I actually ended up just doing discus most of the time. Discus, or I did do long jump because that was like individual too, so I didn't have to like line up and deal with that competition feeling. But when I graduated from high school, I did a program called AmeriCorps, and I was based out of Sacramento, California, and it was a team-based traveling program, and there were 10 of us, I think, and we worked and lived together basically, so we were together all the time. Part of the AmeriCorps program is physical fitness, because it's physical training, because it's a government-based program, and we would run for like 15 minutes, 5 days a week or something. Maybe one day a week we'd go for 30 minutes. And I quickly realized if I ran by myself on my time off, I could get away from everybody else that I lived with and worked with. So I started doing that and really enjoyed it. And then when I came back here to the Adirondacks, I had grown up hiking and canoeing and spending a lot of time outdoors, but wasn't really running. And I started doing it just recreationally with friends. We started out doing like a marathon relay actually for a couple different years in Lake Placid for the Lake Placid Classic, or the Lake Placid Marathon. And they stopped doing the relay. So then I was like, well, let me try the half marathon distance, see how that goes. That was fun and fine. And then I, all this time I'm running on trails also to sort of just like use it as my meditation time and time to get away. And quickly realized I could travel like through the mountains a lot farther if I was running, and it became a challenge to see how far I could go and different peaks I could run to. And just kind of continued that way. It's like, I remember sitting down and talking to a friend and saying, I think I can do a marathon. I don't know. We'll see how far my body can take me. Like, I'm not super worried about like my cardiovascular system. I'm worried about like my body being able to handle the stress of training. And then eventually it just became, I never thought I would do a 100-mile race, and now look at me.
I know.
But, yeah, so now I race up to 100-mile distance, mostly mountainous kind of ultra races, trail races. In the wintertime here, I do a lot of road running though, to kind of work on speed and leg turnover, and that's what I have available to me in the winter. I do a little bit of snowshoe racing and snowshoe training here in the winter, or backcountry skiing, but I do a lot of just road running. This time of year right now, luckily things are really opening up. We still have quite a bit of snow in the high peaks though, so I'm trying to stick to low elevation trails, but.
And they're all open.
All the trails are open. I mean, as far as like the COVID-19 stuff goes, everything's open to anybody actually. They did restrict some parking in like St. Hubert's parking area, but everything's open. And then, I could go into the high peaks right now if I wanted to, but the snow's still there and it's pretty crummy, and I'm kind of just avoiding it. It's like that, like kind of too icy in places, and then there's still enough snow you're going to post hole, above 3,000 feet. So I'm kind of trying to avoid going in there, but sticking to a lot of like the mountain bike trails and stuff are really good because they do a lot of really great work here. on like stormwater runoff and erosion management and all that sort of thing. So the trails drain well, and so they're ready early, in Wilmington and that sort of thing. So it's nice.
So I looking at your ultra sign up, you have a bunch of impressive finishes. But it looks like you started in 2014. So back then, did you have immediate success?
I guess, but again, it's like, I guess that was a Wakely Dam Ultra. Is that on there for 2014? So that's a great race, very small, sells out pretty quick. It's like you have to write in and apply, and they announce it on Facebook, as and it all fills within an hour because it's within the Adirondack Park. You can only have, so many people running an event that you have to apply for a permit for. So that race, I think, is like 75 people. And friends of mine were doing it, from up in this area. It's a good like hour and a half, 2 hour drive from here, but the starting line. But I thought, why not? That'd be kind of fun to go see how I do. And it's an all self-supported race. There's no aid station, so you carry all your, your water treatment with you because there's a lot of water available. And had a great time. Really enjoyed it and did well. And then it was thought like, okay, yeah, I can do this. This is fun. I can, do well at it. And then I did. The Vermont 50 was my first.
Yeah, it was like your next race was a 50 miler.
Yeah, and so the Wakely Dam Ultra is 32 and change. So yeah, so and it's it's kind of rugged. It's just sort of it's like it's on the Northville Placid Trail in an area where there's barely any crossroads. So once you're out there, you're like out there. Either you're turning around and walking back to the start, or you're walking to the. So after doing that race, I thought. And I had a really good day and felt really good. And so I was like, I can keep going, there's like, why not? I keep trying, keep going farther. So the Vermont 50 is another really great event that I think is really good for a first 50 miler because it's a lot of runnable terrain, which is also difficult if you're going to try to run everything. But at the same time, there's a mountain bike race going on at the same time, so you have a lot of people around and it's exciting and people are encouraging you, and it's a beautiful time of year in Vermont. It can be really hot. The year I did it was in the high 80s, so it was a warm race, but yeah, it's a really fun event as well.
And how'd you do?
Great. I won that year, so not expected. I kind of went out again actually with my friend Jan Welford, who also was doing Wakely Dam. So he's kind of been instrumental in my ultra running career. And he was doing Vermont 50. And I remember running into him and my friend Jason Fiegel, who also did Wakely, and they were running Vermont 50. And so I caught up to those guys. And I think Jason was having a bit of a tougher day. And Jan, had really good results at Vermont before and podiumed. And wasn't having a good day that day. So he's like, I'm going to drop, I'll see you at the aid station. Like, that sounds great. And then he ended up pacing me in the last 9 miles, which was really fun. And finishing, I didn't expect to, I just wanted to finish, like first 50, you just want to finish and have fun and not have it be a miserable experience. And
I finished like 450s and I still feel like I'd like to finish goal number 1.
Yeah, agreed. And having fun, right? Like,
yeah,
I think, and what I learned from Jan that day, I will say, like he wasn't having fun out there, like he had gone into it expecting, wanting to do well because he had previous success there. And when he, didn't feel like he was having the best day, he then wasn't having fun. And so for him, it was like, he'd rather just drop than, and, because his mom was there and he was able to spend time with family and still cheer for me and stuff. So that was great. And crew for Jay too, Jason. So it was a good lesson though of like, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing really, like there's certainly times you want to push through, but like why do it if it's not a good time?
Every situation is different. I feel like there's some people that are like death before DNF and it's like, but really? And I mean, it depends on also what your motivations are to being Absolutely. There, like I really figured out that the races that really suck for me are ones that I shouldn't have started. It's not really like anything bad happens in the race. It's like I should not have probably started and then it's just kind of crappy.
Yeah,
So,
I think if you go in, right, you need to go into it not expecting to drop, because that's like a bad, you just don't want to go into it with like a negative
people
idea.
do that though.
I know they do. But that means, right, you're not trained well, like things have happened leading up to the race that you're not prepared. Like I always tell my athletes that, and everybody, I think, and a lot of people understand this, like it's about the journey, getting to that starting line is the challenge, right? And then the starting line is really just a celebration.
Yeah.
You should be out there enjoying it.
Yeah.
So
I call the race the cake. Like you're baking a cake, and then especially like in the week of taper, you're like really baking the cake and like adding all the extra things, and then the race is just you get to eat the cake. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, like, and I like to say to people too, like, what happens when you do well at a race? Like, not really much. Like you gain some confidence, like you get to eat that cake, and hopefully there's some sprinkles on there now, and it's like extra delicious, but it doesn't really change that much.
No, not even like immediately after. Like I feel like when you finish a trail race, it's so like it's the best because then everybody's there and it's fun, but it's also very anticlimactic. It's like you finish, and for me sometimes, probably for you too, like no one's there, so you're like yay, and then everybody starts coming in, and you're like clapping and stuff, and like nobody remembers who won, like because like the winner came in, and you're like I don't know what the winner looks like because it was like 4 hours ago, and you're all just sitting there eating chili, and I can barely even remember what happened in the race, and I just did it, so it takes me like a week to like process anything.
Yeah, I mean, and I find that really fun. Like, so I got to go back to a little bit like how I started getting more competitive, and I ended up working for La Sportiva actually before I was on their national team and was a tech rep. So I was, signed up for all these regional events anyway, like the Heiner Challenge, down in Pennsylvania, and there was one in New Hampshire. I can't remember the name of it. And there, like I had all these little races I was wanting to go do anyway. And so the Northeast rep, Bill Pelkey, came to me from La Sportiva and said, "Do you want a job?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "Well, we'll make you a regional ambassador, and then we'll pay you to go race these races and then set up the shoes and hang out afterward." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds perfect." I mean, then I get to hang out and talk about running and, running shoes. That's great. So it's paid for my expenses to get to races. And that it was the best part, right? Like nobody, like, and you're right, I'd be able to go race the race and do well typically and finish, so then I could hang out and talk to people and set up the tent and stuff. But nobody knew, like it was just hanging out and talking about shoes and running.
Yeah. My favorite way to volunteer is because I'm like, I don't know how to build a trail or anything. My favorite way to volunteer is race registration.
Yeah.
And then all the people that are like, especially for you Cayuga trails, because I'll be there and I'm running like, the half distance or whatever. And everybody else like, oh, I'm running the baby. I'm only running a marathon. I'm like, okay, I'm running the marathon. It's a marathon. That's 26 miles. Okay.
Right.
It is difficult. So you're not like, it's all about reassuring. That's not the baby race.
Right. Yeah.
But it's great. So in 2019, you won Broken Arrow, and Broken Arrow was like a month before Western States, right?
That was 2016, but yes.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It was though, like it's right around Western States, right?
It's the weekend before, typically, yeah.
So then in 2016, did you like see Western States, and did you were like, I want to come back here?
Yeah, so I think I flew out before Western States happened. So that's that race in 2016, Broken Arrow, that was the first year for the race. And I was invited to come participate by one of the race directors, and was kind of blown away that I was offered, an entry, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to, but I wasn't sure I'd even make it. Like I remember thinking like, yeah, sure, I'll sign up for it because they've invited me, but I don't know if I'm going to go. And then my mom and I went out just kind of like on a whim for just a short weekend trip. So we got there like Thursday night, and I raced the VK on Friday, which was like Friday morning. So we got there Thursday night. I raced Friday morning, but it was a delayed start because there was like a snowstorm overnight. So there was like wind and snow like up on the top where they wanted us to finish. So they ended up delaying the start for that. And then Saturday was the 54K. and I think we might have left on Monday. So I was only there, through the weekend, but that weekend they start setting up for Western States. And it's the same, we ran some of the course that they take up to, the first 3 miles of Western States up to Emigrant Pass. So it was pretty amazing to like be there. And at the same time, I was sort of like, and there were racers coming in, so some people came in to even run like just the VK of Broken Arrow that were also going to race at Western States. So some of the pros and like big names and stuff. So that was exciting. And it was the first time for me being at a race that they had a really great party and an expo set up and stuff at Broken Arrow. They did it, and it was, even being the first year, I could tell like this is a special place and a special event. And they're so engaged in their community and really care and do a great job. And it's probably my favorite race. It's probably been my favorite race that I've been to. And I was there in 2016, and then 2017, I raced Western States. 2018, I went back and raced, and then last year I broke my ankle, so I did not go. But I told the race directors, Brendan, I was like, I'll be here every year, hopefully, if I can, even just volunteering, because it's really fun, really, really good, fun community of people there.
So do you think, is that what the East Coast needs? It's just like better pre and post race party, and then we'll just be like lighten it up like the West Coast?
I don't know. That's an interesting question, right? Like, why is it that the West Coast seems to get this reputation of like, that's where the races are, that's where the party is. But then, like, for example, like Heiner is an amazing event with, I don't think, yeah, I mean, there's 1,000 people that line up to race that event in Pennsylvania. I don't think there's anything that big. I'm trying to think, like in the US. Like it was that right. Like I've raced, like lining up at UTMB with 2,500 people behind me was pretty exciting, but like lining up for Heiner almost as exciting. If they'd had the music playing, maybe that they play at UTMB, it would have been the same. But that's a good question. I don't know why the East Coast doesn't have the same reputation. I think we've made this Beast Coast kind of reputation because it's tough here. Like there's different environmental conditions that make it more rugged, I think. But at the same time, West Coast, like there's a lot of really rocky, really dry terrain that makes it also very difficult, like environmental wise.
So do you think that like making it, so I think we created the Beast Coast because we wanted like more eyes on the East Coast, but do you think it's also been kind of like preventing people from trying it?
That's maybe, I mean, maybe, yeah, do you think it seems too rugged to some people? But I don't know.
I mean, I consider myself a Beast Coaster, but I don't run that like tough races. Like, I mean, I should just be like, no, it's okay, you guys. Like, really, look at me, and I run here, so you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, I also think it's something to do with the dynamics between like, East Coasters in general, not just runners, have a reputation of being sort of like standoffish and like goal oriented, like in their everyday work life or whatever, right? And West Coast is very like new frontier, kind of like Wild West almost, and I think there's just something to it, a little different. Yeah, I don't know.
Just different vibe, yeah. I think we are a little bit more, even though we like to say we're all hippy dippy trail runners, we are a little bit more uptight. Like there is like a chip on my shoulder, I feel like, especially because I've been talking to a lot of athletes recently, and not a bad thing, they're not rude, but there are just like, I would rather do this race that no one has heard of and do better than go and do this other race. It's
interesting.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think for myself, I like to challenge myself with a competitive field, like I will say, like, for example, like that Wakely Dam race, like, it's not a competitive field. It's like the people that are doing it they love being out in the wilderness in the Adirondacks. It's like, it's self-supported. It's really like you're just out there, on the trail with, maybe with other runners, maybe alone. I will say racing these kind of smaller East Coast races has probably been a good thing for my career where I can do well, and you know, certainly right, like looking at ultra sign up, have good results. But I also really enjoy going to these big races, you know, in Europe or in the West Coast that are competitive to, not necessarily like, I will say one of my largest weaknesses is probably comparison, you know, between myself in previous years, but myself against other racers and athletes. So I try not to do that, but I do. But I really also enjoy just going and lining up with a competitive field.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this year I was like, Lake Sonoma, it's the first one. This is reality check, Ellie, because you've had some success over here, but that's the big dogs. And, you know, I was ready, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a huge reality check for Ellie. And then it was canceled. So I was like, well, maybe that's a sign.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like, yeah, I guess I'll say, like, for the last 2 years, I've been signed up for like the North Face 50 in San Francisco. I raced that in 2016, and then was signed up. Nice, yeah. And
first 50.
It was, oh really? Nice. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, again, it's like so runnable. It makes it really tough with those climbs that you could run if you know, like, were a maniac. But sorry, can you hear my dog barking outside?
Just a little. It's not bad. It's fine. It adds to the ambiance.
Okay, good. It's real. So like going out to it like puts you in a scenario where like you have to find out, you know, who you are, right? Like, and what kind of racer you are, certainly, you know, like, do you race your own race, or do you like try to, you know, keep with a front pack, or do you like, it's definitely helped me being in those types of scenarios, like even with Broken Arrow, for example, like I was racing to try to keep up with the front pack of people, you know, but it also pushed me to a level that I don't know that I would have gone to alone, for sure.
Understood. I mean, I think coming from just running on the marathon on the roads recently, I still feel like I'm in the run my own race and run at a pace or run at an effort. I'm more of an effort-based runner than I am like, I should stay with Steph Bruce at the front because, you know, like I want to be up there. I'm just not at that level yet. And so I think that actually plays well into trails because like some races that I've been to, like people like jet off the start line and I'm like, where are you going? You got 7 hours. And so I think that like being a little bit, I've been trying to be like a little bit more run my own race in the beginning and then see how the day goes because like it's so long, it can change. So like, I mean, I might as well like run how I'm feeling like I should start running in the beginning and then like either amp it up or like take it back a little and see rather than like try to pace myself off somebody else. But it'll be interesting to see like when the next races happen and you know, I'm still learning, so it'll definitely always be an fluid process.
For sure. I think I think, and I will say like probably right back like in 2016 I was very new to the competitive scene, so for me it was probably a mistake to push, you know, like I mean it turned out okay but like I also learned some lessons, you know, like like it's tough to know, but I do think it's pretty exciting when you do come out of it okay, even though you're pushing probably too hard and you're like, oh, this is it gives you that confidence to get to a new place where you might not have gone to otherwise.
Definitely, I totally agree. Do you find that like for more women than men, I just as I read articles and things like that, this just like sticks out to me. I think that women, and this is good, like it's taught me that you can be running and then have like a low point, and that doesn't mean your race is over. It just means you gotta like keep going. It doesn't mean you went out too fast. It doesn't mean anything. It just means it's a low point. Like take stock, because I feel like sometimes men more often, most not elites, I don't think, more like age groupers will just drop at that point. Like I went out too fast, so I dropped. Do you find that, or am I just like reading into something?
I don't know. I don't know if I agree. Like, I don't know if I've noticed that trend. I guess I've noticed more frequently. It feels like, sorry.
That's an opinion.
Hold on, Ella. I would say I think that I've noticed more like maybe more men elite will drop like if they think that their race is not going to work out, they drop early. Because I mean, a lot of times elites will have other races on the calendar that they're like, well, or there's other options, right? So like if you don't finish this race next, 2 weeks, there's a different 50K I could race, that could take its place. So like if you don't bury yourself this week, 2 weeks from now, maybe there's an event you could do. So I think sometimes elite look at it that way, I would say. I personally have always been the type that's like, I can finish this. Like there's worse things I could do than walk out of here for 7 hours.
Yeah. I enjoy it. Like I really like racing, but I also like running. So I'm like, even if I don't feel like I'm super competitive right now, or like, I don't know, so unless it's like an injury or I do have another, or if it's like a build-up race and I do have another race that I want to save a little for. Yeah. I mean, generally I'm like, this is just going to be chilling out here on the trails with my friends.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, I plan my calendar such that like I plan on putting in a good effort so I have time to recover, in between. Basically. But yeah.
It's interesting to cross over between marathons and ultras because like at least building up for like a big marathon, even if it wasn't going very well, like that's my event. I'm not going to be able to recover my body quick enough to like race something in 2 weeks, Right. So it's like it's that point of like, I might as well because I am not running again, Right. It's interesting, but so let's go back and talk about then. So 2016, you win Broken Arrow, you see Western States. And then 2017, you decide to move into your truck and basically do a tour towards the West Coast and then run Western States. So funny story, in 2017, I was planning to move into a van, and I did in 2018. So actually I would read like some of your articles and stuff when I was like, how did she do this? Okay, a little different because it's cold here, but like it's inspiration. So yeah, why don't we talk about that? Let's bring back 2017.
Sure. So actually the first time that I lived out of my truck was in 2015. And that was for 4 months. So that was a long time. But again, it was summertime out west, and so I still, like, it barely rained, it wasn't that cold. It was okay. But that setup, I had a Ford Ranger that I created a bed in the back with a cubby cabinet kind of on one side. And it was just a small, because the Ranger truck bed is really small. It was a 2005 truck, so it was tiny, but it's 6 feet long. So I had like a 2-foot bed that I slept on with me and my little dog, Mocha. And then I got my Tacoma. And so when I got the Tacoma, I thought, all right, I'm going to, like plan this out a little different, but I ended up almost with the same setup. So it's got a 4-foot bed in it, like a full sheet of plywood, 4 foot by 6 foot, which is much more comfortable. And then my cubby along one side where I can put stuff. And I'm able to like fold the bed in half though, so I could put it, like if I wanted a little more space to like sit and do something in there, I could. One of my lessons from my Ranger was getting a truck cap that's tall enough that I could sit up inside, so that's really helpful. So I looked at getting a van before I got the Tacoma, thinking maybe I'd get like a Dodge ProMaster or something like that, and test drove a couple actually, and I just couldn't get used to it being my everyday driver vehicle also, because I do live in a house. Some people be like, oh, how do you survive? I'm like, well, I have a house that I go back to, but I do, I'm a fair weather truck liver, I guess.
Yeah.
Or van lifer. So the truck, it's set up great. Like I have a little solar panel on top with a little battery generator, they call it. That's a Goal Zero Yeti 150 or something. So I can charge a laptop and my watch, my phone, those sorts of things off of it. But like living out of the truck in the desert or in the Pacific Northwest is pretty simple. You don't really need a whole lot, and it made it really nice to like just pull up to the trailhead, and that's where you camp for the night. And out west it is much easier than the East Coast, I find, because there's so much more public land, a lot of BLM land and a lot of national forest land where you can basically just drive up a dirt road and disperse camp wherever you want. So that was my plan, and that I've always had, in 2015, I I did that for 4 months, which was amazing. And I traveled around the US sky running circuit for that in 2015. So when 2017 came around, I thought, well, why not, make a big trip I'll start with, I was offered a sponsor spot for Western States through Jalbo, which was amazing. I was not expecting that either, was really honored. And so I created the La Montagna tour, which is Italian for the mountain love tour, basically, or sort of. So I was like, okay, I'll create a training tour so I can go like southern Utah for a few months, because this was in the end of April and May. We're here, it may snow here next week. So I was like, it'd be nice to go somewhere warm where I can, train and get some mountain time in. And why not? I've always sort of had this like wanderlust that I think I probably get more from my dad than anyone. He travels a lot of times out of a Scamp trailer from 1974 or something. And he lives in Idaho or Arizona in the wintertime. And it's just like a very simple, very sort of ideal lifestyle. And so
like how much you need and how much you really don't.
Right. And I found in 2015, when I came back from that excursion, it was like, yeah, I have all this stuff here that I haven't used for 4 months that I don't really need, but how quickly I just fell back into that routine. It's easy, but it gave me this appreciation for like running water is amazing. Like a flushing toilet's pretty cool. And yeah, like heat, is just like this, like, it's so nice to have these things. So it makes you really appreciate those small things so much more. Yeah. Although I will say, like, making coffee on the tailgate of the truck is somehow more enjoyable sometimes than making it in the house. I don't know. It's just like one of those things. Like, it's the process oriented stuff.
Like breakfast after a morning run, just like your van doors open, you're just like, this is actually very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's too, like, it's the simplicity of like, your day isn't filled with, like my obligations for the day were like making sure I had enough gas to get where I was going, making sure I had like groceries to last me maybe a week if I wasn't going to be in a town, and where I was going to go running, and that was it, so it makes it so much simpler than like, I think we're all experiencing now being stuck at home, like it becomes a little like overwhelming when you have access to all of this input all the time through like social media and all these things. So being out in the middle of nowhere without cell phone service for days on end sometimes was pretty nice. It was a nice thing.
After the initial anxiety wears off, you're like, actually, I never want to go back. And if you realize that like not everything needs to be answered immediately, and that you're not saving the world, so it's not a huge deal.
Yeah, I think, and I struggle internally sometimes with like the selfishness of that. There's certainly like being involved with friends and family versus like being kind of a very introverted, except somewhat extroverted athlete that just lives in their truck in the mountains. It's sometimes, I think a lot of people probably struggle with those commitments and how to handle that stuff.
Sure. I mean, it's a balance. It's definitely a balance. Yeah. I think that our society is so warped right now that like every notification needs to be answered immediately, when really it's just like, it's okay if you don't answer for like 5 hours. Like, it's really, or the next day. Like, I'm not saying we should all just ignore everybody and go live. It's like, no, but just, you can relax about responding to everything immediately. It's okay. It's actually really good.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did Western States go?
So Western States did not go as planned. I went into it feeling pretty good. Like when I left here to go on the tour, I was feeling pretty strong and good, but had been kind of burning the candle at both ends probably all winter. I was working almost full time as a nurse then. So I would get up, to go running at 4 a.m. in the winter with a headlamp, and then go work 12-hour shift. And, at the time I didn't feel bad. Like I felt good. I was like, this is, an exciting time. And I went on this road trip and I started, at the time had really bad cystic acne that I had never had before. And I was kind of attributing it to like, hey, maybe it's just something I'm eating. Maybe I have like a gluten intolerance or something happening.
Nope. Whenever I get it, it's because I'm tired.
Stress, right? And
yep.
Your body's not recovering. So for me, like I tried not to think about it. It really did affect how I thought about myself though, and how I like even interacted with other people. I never thought I would be so self-conscious that way, but really am. So that was kind of eye-opening. And then so training went well though, and I got to the race at Western States and was still sort of dealing with that. Hadn't really figured out what it was. Like I thought it was maybe a rash. I thought I had like, I didn't know what was happening. I even went to the doctor. They put me on antibiotics for 10 days while I was in Utah. I skipped out. I was going to attempt a Mount Whitney FKT attempt, and I was on antibiotics, and I was like, nah, this probably is not the best idea. So I skipped out on that. And then I, but still showed up for the starting line at Western States and felt okay. Like I felt like, okay, I'm ready for this. Tried not to get too, absorbed in the whole scene, and really enjoyed. I went and volunteered at Broken Arrow that race. So that was really exciting and fun. And a lot of my teammates from La Sportiva were there. So that was fun. And so race day came. It was a year, like if you've seen the movie Unbreakable, have you seen that?
Yeah.
I just watched it last night for the first time, actually.
Me too. And I'm still like, Killian, how did you keep that suit white the whole time? I'm like that, like the whole, like I was rooting for the suit. Like I was like, come on, you're almost done. And he did it. I was like, I think his outfit won.
I couldn't believe it either. I'm like, those are some short shirts that are not dirty.
White.
But the conditions were really similar to the year in 2017 to that year. Like a lot of snow early on, and a lot of like when you see them like slipping and sliding up top, like this memory popped into my head. We were up in that zone, and I passed Camille Herron is like sliding down the side of like a snow bank with like her Nike, like they're like running like road running shoes on basically, and she just wasn't used to being in the snow, like it. And I was really comfortable in the snow coming from here, but immediately our feet got wet really early on with just all the water runoff, and it got to be like 105 I think in the canyons that year that I did it. So you're just like drenching yourself in water and ice water. And by mile 62 at Forest Hill, my feet were pretty bad, but I was sort of trying to ignore it. I was like, it's gonna be fine. And they were just like, soaked, and I changed my shoes. But really should have like been doing preventative things back like at Dusty Corners and like really early on, but didn't. So, and I probably should have like told people, because they were saying to me like, do you want me to not get water down your shoes? And I didn't really think about it. Like the volunteers are thinking about that stuff, and they want you to like lean forward to like drench you in ice water. But I didn't really, I was like, whatever, it's fine. They're already wet. And
sometimes I feel bad for asking volunteers for things.
They're amazing. It's really amazing. Like I was like having a really good race. I remember being like so happy to see like because they're all excited, that like Western States is I didn't understand really beforehand before I went, like how people get so obsessed.
Yeah.
Like it becomes people's lives, it's like they live for Western States, and now I know why. I mean, it's like it really is like there's nothing like it. And I remember I was invited to be on a panel at it's called the Aid Station. It's like a shoe store / like community gathering area. And so I was on this panel with like Craig Thornley and a bunch of other folks that have been in Western States, for forever. And the room is filled with people that have done Western States. Like, there's a lot of silver, 10,000 or 1,000 mile buckles in that room,
mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And that night was the first time I was like, oh, okay, this, and everybody's telling stories, and I was like, this is a really special place. And I remember Craig saying during that panel, like if everybody could watch or be at the finish line of Western States for the golden hour, the last hour, the world would be a better place. And I agree with that. I think watching people finish Western States after 30 hours of being out there and pushing their bodies beyond what they think they could do is like, you can just feel like it's just uplifting, and it's like there is so much power in that. But anyway, so we'll go back to my story. So I get to Forest Hill and my feet aren't doing great. But I was like, okay, I'm, and I've had run a lot of the course beforehand. A friend that I met actually just on Facebook, like weeks before the race, allowed me to like stay in his driveway in my truck, and he would shuttle me, like he'd drop me off and I would run back to his house to Forest Hill, or he would pick me up, that sort of thing. So I saw a lot of the course ahead of time, which was good. So I knew from Forest Hill I had some really nice runnable downhill, and I was looking forward to that. And when I got to Cal 2, and I just wasn't doing good. It was like really hot, feet hurt. I wasn't eating a lot. It was getting worse. And it was by the time we got past Cal 2, and like had just fallen out of the top 10 for the women. I think I was in like maybe 13th place or something. So I got a little pumped. I'm like, okay, good. Maybe I can come back, because I'd been in the top 10 the first half. And then my feet just continued to go, just get worse and more painful. And by the time I got to the river, I was just like hobbling, like people were passing me walking. Like I was going so slow. They were walking and passing me. So I got to the river, got up to Green Gate, and I sat down up there, and my crew was there, and I was like, I think I'm done. Like, this is mile 80. And I was like, I don't think I can do this, and I'm crying, and I take my shoes off, and my feet, like every toe is like blistered with like water-filled blister or liquid-filled blister. There, like the crease on the pad of my front, in the front of my foot was just like super deep and kind of like starting to shear a little bit, and it was not good. So, I mean, really, and it's all because my feet were wet the whole time. But so we sat there. We got some 2 Tums Blister Shield, which is like a hydrophobic kind of wax powder. And we put that on my feet, and it repels water, but it also helped to kind of like pull water back out of my, the third spaces in my feet. So I sat there and I drank a beer. It was like a Tecate or something that one of the aid station people had. And so she's sitting there with me, and she's like, why are you doing this race? And I was like, well, I was just like in a really bad mind space. And I was like, I don't know. I don't even know why I'm doing this race. I only got in it because I got a sponsored spot. And she's like, well, like the only reason I've been an aid station worker for the last like 10 years is so that hopefully I get an opportunity to race this race someday. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I probably should be a little more appreciative. And then Maggie Gerderl walked through, and I'd already been sitting there for probably like an hour. And this is like, I'd lost a lot of time at this point. And I thought she was probably way ahead of me. So she comes through, and I'm like, what are you doing out here still? And she goes, I don't know. What are you doing out here? She's like, I'm having a hard day. And I was like, I think I'm done. I don't know if I can keep moving. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, we're all having a hard day, but we're going to keep going. And it was because it was so hot that day. A lot of people had rough races so far. Mm-hmm. So I was like, all right, well, let's try this, I guess. So I stood up and like kind of tried to just walk for a minute, like see how my foot felt. We cut my shoes back open to put them back on because my feet were still so swollen that I couldn't get my shoes back on. So we like cut out the toe of the top of my foot, but left the toe bumper in there so that I can put my shoes on. And then I still had my beer. I don't think I'd finished it yet. So I'm like, let's go. And so we just start walking down my poor pacer, Corinne Malcolm. I don't think she was planning on, I think she thought I was done, so she would like plan on pacing me from there to the end. And I was like, come on, let's go. And so she's like, really? I was like, yeah, let's move. And we literally walked. I was like, we can walk, right? And at that point from Green Gate, you have to walk to where the cars are parked anyway, which is like a mile and a half. So I was like, well, let's at least start moving in this direction. If I'm, if this is no good, then at least I'm at the car, and at that point, once I got up and started moving, it was sort of like my mind had flipped, and I was like, yeah, I can just walk out of here. It's fine. It's like no big deal. 17, and then as we're going, I was like, oh, only 17 miles left. Totally fine. Just gonna keep walking. And so it took us like 8 hours to walk that 20 miles out of there. And I finished in 29 or 28:50 something, I think. And so that was a new experience for me to like have. I only passed one person who after that was Scotty Mills, who's a well-known ultra runner in that region. He's done Western States. I want to say he's probably one of the 1,000-mile buckle owners, and I think he's a race director for San Diego also. But he, poor guy, is like leaned up against a tree, like his lower back muscles weren't really responding anymore, so he was having a hard time standing up straight. So he's the only guy that I ended up passing, actually. And we stopped and chit chatted for a little bit, and we both were just like, I don't know, why do we do these things? Like, look at us out here. And it was like an amazing experience. So to have that perspective from, like being in the top 10 to then chasing cutoffs in the same event was a pretty, humbling experience, but also rewarding. And finishing it was like, it was exciting I was happy to be done, but I was also sort of like disappointed in I was excited that I had finished and pushed through, disappointed in the results considering I went into it with expectations. So that was a lesson also. And certainly learned, a ton, like as far as foot care and all that, like those technical aspects, like really have changed for me now. But it's an eye-opening experience, I guess. So
have you thought about maybe bringing it to the East Coast and doing like a tour to Eastern states?
that would be cool.
That'd be awesome.
I have not spent much time in the South at all, so that would be kind of cool. I could go down there and do some training. I mean, the Eastern states scares me a little bit too. Like that sounds like a really
tough winner, Wesley, last week, and dude is like 21, and he's like, yeah, I just sort of did it, no lows, like course record. And I'm like, oh, he's 21. He lives with his family right now, and like I'm like, dude is too young and doesn't have enough experiences to have those demons that come out during those hundreds. Like I tell you, I got a lot of them. So no, he was great, but he made it seem manageable. So it's just maybe something we can plan. If I force you to do, if I encourage you to do this, I'll help you plan it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of places, and I have found, especially like considering the age that we're in, like staying closer to home, there's a lot of really cool places I have not seen yet. That would be a cool project to like do an East Coast tour. And with like a finish line of a race start somewhere would be pretty cool. Yeah,
I feel like the last time a big name did something cool on the East Coast with like Scott Jurek and the Appalachian Trail. That's honestly what comes to mind, so that's bad.
Yeah, I think, and that goes back to like what is it about the East Coast? I did a cool little was it in 2018? I did a little Northwest tour, and I went from here to Vermont and did like Camel's Hump and Mansfield, and then over to New Hampshire and ran with some friends there, and then went to Maine and went to Acadia, and just to like see different little trailheads and trail areas that I hadn't been to before, and just out of the truck. And that was really kind of an interesting, like, just gave me appreciation for what we have here that you don't see, like in the media. basically.
It definitely has decreased my wanderlust, just like noticing what I have right outside my door.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't need to go anywhere. I have beautiful stuff here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we've been going for a while now. So why don't you, what do you have any plans for this 2020? Like any, obviously not races, but FKTs are something that you like. So what's next?
Well, I had mentioned last time we talked about maybe doing the 46er supported FKT. So that's still, like I think the goal. I was thinking about it though. I was thinking about doing Leadville this year. So that's in August. So there's potential that might still happen. It is a La Sportiva is the headlining sponsor for that event. So it would be, and I was there last year for it, not racing, just crewing and helping out. And I would love to do that. Huh?
You see Kara Goucher?
I actually did not see her because she did the marathon, right? Distance. I think it's a different day.
Oh.
So I was there for the 100-mile. I think it's a different time. Yeah, that's a different weekend. But it's a really, I had been there a couple times. I did a training camp with La Sportiva there as a runner guide, and was there for the race last year. And it would be a pretty fun, it's a bucket list race, right? But it depends on who knows what's going to happen with the, races in general. But and I did say, like, if I'm going to ever race that event, I need to go out with some time to acclimate to the altitude. When I went there for the training camp, I remember going up over Hope Pass at 12,000 feet and was like dying. And that was just like on a training run, like we went up and over and back, and up and over the first time felt fine. Coming back over, to go back down, it's like, I'm supposed to help, like, be the guide helping other people. Like, I feel like I'm going to have to be rescued up here. But so that was, and I don't do really well at altitude. I need some time typically to either I need to go out and race the next day, or I go out with like 3 weeks. So just depends on what happens. If the race is going to still happen, I would like to go out with a couple of weeks to train out there and spend some time in Colorado probably and explore a little bit. It's a state that I started exploring last year a little bit, but before that really hadn't spent any time out there. It's probably because I knew how cool it is and I didn't want to like have another place that I need to go to. But so that's a thought for the summer. So I'm thinking if I do the 46er, it may end up being like end of June, early July, and then heading out west for a couple of weeks, to acclimate and train and be out there.
Well, that sounds lovely, actually. Leadville is it's on my radar, not for me personally, just like I like to read about everything. So yeah, I've read a lot about it, especially with Rob Carr last year. That was exciting. So yeah. Well, that's really cool. Thank you, Sarah. To close, why don't we tell people where they can find you online? You have a blog that I read this morning. It's great. And so why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. So my blog is sarahruns.com, Sarah with an H. And I haven't actually put anything up recently, so I should probably write something new. But you can find me there, and that has links to my Instagram, which is sarahkais_runs. And then I think Facebook is the same thing. But
you could do a race report for your last race on Ultra Sign Up, which is Mendon, where we were together.
That was fun. So that was my first time putting a race bib on at all in 2019. So that was my only race, which was exciting.
Well, I'm honored.
And it was super fun. And then I went back to Mendon and did like a 20-mile training run. I kind of just kept doing the loop,
It's
and
so pretty.
It's a great spot, and last weekend I did the Crescent Trail and got a new women's FKT on that. So that was super fun. And again, that was like just a cool trail that I, had done a few miles on it prior. My boyfriend lives in Rochester area, so I'd done a few miles on it training, and it's another like just close to home adventure that people can go explore, which is super fun.
Yeah, no, I really like it a lot out there. You could come to Zero SPF, which is in July.
Right. That's on the Crescent Trail, right?
Yeah. The year I did it, it was cold. I was like, I don't need any sunscreen actually. And then last year, instead of doing it, I had to do this like a half marathon on the road, which I almost died because it was so hot. So I don't really know. Maybe I just shouldn't race in July.
I know that's one of the deciding factors if I do the 46, you know, like I'd rather it not be like super hot, super buggy. Bugs are an issue up here too. Like,
oh God, yeah.
if the black flies are terrible or the mosquitoes, so it's like, I don't know if it's, I don't know. We'll see. So
Yeah.
it might be kind of like a fluid deciding factor about when that happens. And if I'm, you know, if my mountain legs are really ready or not.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for talking to me, Sarah. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day and a healthy training cycle.
Thanks. Yeah, great to talk to you.